All right, today's architecture rundown features our first landscape architect. I'm Chris Crocitto.
And I'm Ramses Terrero, and we have paraprofessional landscape architect Austen Cabret.
Hi guys.
Welcome, man. Welcome.
What's up, man? So tell us, what is it that you do?
Right now I'm doing my thesis, but I've been unemployed for about 6 months, I think now. But when I was doing paraprofessional work for the county, we were doing park design, playground design, which was really cool because I actually got a project built.
Nice.
Wow, that sounds amazing, man. How long were you working as a paraprofessional?
So I was working for 2.5 years. I started, I think, my junior year.
Well,
Okay. No. Did that project that you had built? How long did that take? Just because I kind of want to know from our standpoint and then from like the landscape standpoint.
Yeah, I think it was in total like a year and a half, maybe 2 years.
Okay.
That was like one of the first things I did when I got there, which was great because I got employed and then my boss, she was like, I want to do something to like help you. I don't want your time to be wasted here. So I want you to get a design like straight away.
sure.
So I learned from her from like for a couple months, and then after she felt comfortable enough with me, she put me straight on to do a design. So I did the majority of the design work. She tweaked it afterwards, and then we sent it out to another department to do the actual construction docs, and then like the actual building of it, and like all the details that go into
Okay.
realizing a project.
Okay.
And
So it's. Oh, you
that's
go
an
ahead.
amazing. That's an amazing opportunity to be able to design straight off the bat, right? I mean, like you said, most people that start as an intern or with no background knowledge, they really don't get to do that, and it's really good that I mean the three of us at least where we started working, we were able to start designing right away, and it really does hone your skill, and it truly gives you a vision of the best part of the profession.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm super appreciative because they didn't need to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think that's been like kind of a common thread or a common narrative that we've kind of seen with the last few videos that we had, that finding a place where you could really nurture your, I guess, eagerness to learn is something very special. So the office you were working in, you said that you outsourced, or they outsourced the CDs and final details. So within the park design, is that typical that you only worry about schematic design or the initial concept phase? Like kind of give us a little bit of detail into to what exactly the landscape side takes care of.
Yeah, so within our office we had, I want to say seven, like we had like four designers, and then we had one guy that was doing like construction through CAD all the time, and
Okay.
then we had the like the director who would oversee the management, and we had people that were like responsible for purchasing and a lot of different specialized. It wasn't all just designers.
Hmm.
um
Okay.
but so like in some projects we would do the construction in-house, and then other projects, if they were bigger or like if we just felt like it should be sent out, then we sent it out to another part, like another department within the government, because we have so many different branches working with us.
Right. Right.
I think that's good. I mean, that's smart. Depending on the size of, I guess, like the employees and how extensive a project can be. As we both know, typically the construction document space takes up about 80% of the budget, 80% of the work,
Hmm.
um, and not 80% of the budget that the client pays you, but 80% of the budget that you, as an employer, pay your employees, since it's such an extensive process. Which is something that Chris and I have talked about previously. That and a lot of times it makes sense to kind of like cash in the schematic design phase and then the design development phase, because for the most part it should be between 30 to 40% of the profits that you gain, but
Yeah.
you're only investing 10 to 20% of the time.
Right.
So if you put it in a vacuum and you look at the ratio of like profits to time invested on it, um, I feel like it makes a lot of sense for a lot of companies to kind of like stop at design development and outsource CDs depending on the size of the project, the scale,
Yeah.
and how intensive those construction documents can take. Right? As we both know, I mean, we could work on construction documents for over a year for some projects, even though the design development phase we did it in half a month or a
Right.
month.
Mm-hmm.
So
Was it what you expected? Because was this your first work experience?
It was my first like truly design-oriented work experience.
Okay.
Before that, I had done an internship with another municipality for GIS.
Okay.
So there was that. And then I had worked in an architecture firm, but as a secretary. So I didn't really do anything. I didn't even touch CAD at that
Okay.
point.
Okay. So
I have
was
a
this what you expected of that field, like architecture or a landscape architect position? Was this exactly like what you expected, or what came from that?
Being so not having a degree, they actually like gave me a lot of liberties that I wasn't expecting. Um, for example, like after a couple months, allowed me to use the company car, which was a cool perk. And like I would go to parks on my own to do it like inspections and take pictures and look for details or like do drawings. And I never expected them to allow someone that hasn't even graduated to do that. So that was really a shocker for me. But aside from that, like the actual workload was pretty similar to what we do in school. It was a lot of AutoCAD, a lot of Photoshop, InDesign.
Okay.
I have a question. I mean, I don't know how accurate you can answer this question.
Mhm.
Um, but okay, so it seems that you worked on two different government landscape offices, right?
No,
Is
I
GIS?
worked in a GIS, but that wasn't for a landscape design. Like
Ah,
they
okay.
were doing it for different purposes.
Okay. Is there any way that you can answer this question? Do landscape job openings, at least here in Miami, are they typically more government based, or are there a lot of offices that are landscape offices? Because at least us, for the most part, we only have like one or two landscape architects that we work with throughout like all the different projects that we have. And most of the time they're not even the ones that we pick, right? It's something that the clients kind of
Mhm.
they recommend us that we work with them since they worked with them previously.
Hmm.
And I know that like I've done freelancing jobs on my own, and the few projects that I've worked on as a freelancer that include landscape, for the most part, it happens to be like the same one or two architecture offices, right?
Well, it is a small field. Like there are less landscape architects than there are
Yeah.
architects.
But is it like, I mean, I know this is a super broad and general question, but the ratio of like private landscape offices to, I guess, governmental offices, do you
Hmm.
have any idea?
I would say it's half half.
Half half?
Yeah, something like that. Because you have like Architectona, GEO, you have Raymond Jungles, there, Wickens and Holtz. Like there's definitely a lot of private. Um, I would say what like gives a lot of attention to public is that the projects tend to be bigger, so people who can afford it is a lot of government. But there's equally as much private projects with people that just have big paycheck or big pockets trying to make these projects.
Yeah.
Okay. And what are the specific programs and software that you typically use in your office, or that a typical landscape architect utilizes?
Yeah, so I'll do two sides because typical landscape architect, they use like Rhino, a lot of Photoshop. They like to do a lot of like real drawing and watercolor. AutoCAD, InDesign for like making booklets, and then like Illustrator. So it's pretty similar. I think we have a less of a focus on parametricism and less of a focus on like rendering engines because we like to do everything in post production. But aside from that, it's a similar workflow. And then when I was working for the county, they didn't use Rhino. They used AutoCAD, Photoshop, and InDesign for mostly everything.
Yeah. That seems pretty typical. I mean, as far as our experience, Ramses and I, that workflow seems pretty typical with what we're seeing now. Um, but would you say that those helped in in transitioning, you learning them in school, or like what's something that you learned in school that helped in your professional setting?
Well, school is where I learned all those programs. Before college, I was pursuing music within high school. So I had never touched Photoshop before. I'd never touched AutoCAD. So undergrad, I really learned like quickly Illustrator, Photoshop, InDesign, and AutoCAD. So that already was enough to get like that's everything I used in the job. Um, and then within the later years, I learned more of like Rhino and rendering engines and some Grasshopper. Um, but I plan to use those for either personal use or for like in a future career.
Yeah.
So they didn't really apply to that job.
Okay.
Yeah, I was the same as you. And when I started university, I had no idea. I didn't even know what AutoCAD was, right? I didn't even know what an architect truly does until, I mean, honestly, I didn't even know what an architect 100% does until I graduated, that I started working professionally. But when I went into college, I thought AutoCAD was spelled like AutoCAT, like CAT. Like that's how ignorant I was on the field, on the programs, the software. When I was in high school, I took 4 years of graphic design. So the only, I guess, prior graphics experience I had was in Photoshop, which you would think that it would help me, right? But it didn't. I don't know why I couldn't really connect or translate my Photoshop skills in education to my architectural education. My renderings in undergrad were something to behold, and I mean that in the worst possible way. Same with my graphic standards and everything. So it was, I mean, unlike you, it was a really rough transition for me, and I really did not learn quickly whatsoever. I have no idea why I remained so stagnant for so many years, even though I had a graphical background. Um, but like Christopher said, at least Photoshop and CAD and stuff like that. Us that we work in a small office and we work with, I guess, government projects as yourself. That's something that I guess that's the main thing we use. You know, I use rendering engines from time to time because I started making renderings in house for the company. And Chris does presentation work as well for the company. Um, and we started 3D modeling so we can get, you know, those graphical presentations, those renderings to the clients, things that the company didn't have before. And those are basic tools that you learn pretty early on within your schooling career, right? All those things like Grasshopper, Rhino. I think what you said is perfect. You know, you'll use it for personal use.
Mm-hmm.
For the most part, in the broader picture, most companies are not going to use parametricism. They're not going to do any crazy stuff because realistically, the budget for those things are a lot higher. And most of the companies that do that are like really big companies, experimental companies. And that's like 20% of the companies out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. We can't all be architects.
We all could
Nice,
be. We all could be, but
yeah. There's not enough liquid capital out there for us to all be architects, I guess you could say.
yeah.
But is there anything that you would tell students right now to focus on or skill to hone before they enter the professional setting?
Okay. So what I would recommend to students coming in, I mean, just brush up on the programs. Like that's your biggest asset at first. You'll learn design thinking through repetition and through studying history and like precedents. But the quicker you can learn the programs, which is like a standardized thing, there's no subjectivity with that, the quicker you can express what it is you want to show in your designs.
Yeah.
I love that. Like what you just said, subjectivity in this. So for the most part, right, every teacher has their own way of designing or way of teaching design. And not that it's a bad thing, right? I mean, we do learn design principles and design elements throughout our schooling career. But for the most part, every company has their own way of doing things. They have their own style, their own design, their own premises. And I mean, whether you want to or not, you're gonna have to adapt to that specific company that you end up working for. So like Austen said, you know, the software and the programs, that's gonna be a general knowledge that will be applied in the same way throughout every single field. So I think that's like a really, key factor to
Yeah,
all of this.
I think something that kind of like ties into that, something to focus on, is something Ramses and I kind of spoke off mic, and we've had multiple conversations about this. Is like tailoring your portfolio and your style to where you're going to work. You know, there's no point in applying or tailoring your style to a place that completely um, opposes or is the complete opposite on the spectrum as yours. You know, what value are you going to bring to a place that you don't understand why they represent certain things in a certain manner? So I think that would kind of like go as a point to yours. Learn the program and learn a style that's prevalent out there. Line weight, graphic, rendering style, I guess you would say, or design methodology. But
Yeah, I completely agree. It could be so simple as just like representation of how you show your drawings. One version could, well, like one style could take so much longer than another, and that's money that you're wasting. And some people might place value into the money wasted, and some people might place value into their aesthetic. And there's no like right answer. It's just what do you care about?
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, and there's companies that there are traditional, conventional companies that for the most part, they just want to get a project in and a project out, right? They understand that the main part of, so a lot of small companies, obviously they have a limited budget, and a lot of them want to stay afloat, and they don't really care that much about, graphical standards and graphical presentation, especially when a lot of them do government projects, because for the most part, government projects has a specific aesthetic and a specific amount of work. They care mostly about, construction documents, which obviously that's the most important part of every project. Like regardless of what they teach you in school, regardless of what you think, without construction documents, you can't get anywhere. But to get to the point, you need to sell an idea, right? Which is where I guess what you guys were talking about comes in, like visualization, graphics, and stuff like that. So I mean, I've experienced it firsthand where I really want to, I guess, invest time in a rendering, invest time in a presentation, and the employer that I've had at the current time, not right now, but at those specific times, they tell me that, it doesn't matter, who cares? Like, we already have the project. Don't spend time on that. We're not gonna make any extra money from that specific point. Just focus all your time on the CDs, right? And that's something that's, I don't know. I think it's a little bit sad. I feel like a lot of companies, they, I understand that you need money flowing, money coming in. But I feel like a lot of companies have really good opportunities to grow, and and I think it's really sad when some companies don't see the value in, kind of bringing something new to the table. As we spoke about in the last video we had with the other Austen, a lot of government projects, like, they want to remain the same. They want to stay stagnant. They want to stay following the same principles and conventional styles for decades. And I feel like it's our job and our duties as architects, landscape architects, designers in general, um, to bring a new quality of spatial conditions and better human experiences with the budgets that we have and the technologies that we have currently, right? I mean, they keep using the same technologies we had like decades ago, and the budget is there, right? Government projects, they have a big budget. We all know, right? We all know government projects, they have a huge budget. Um, and like you said, they do the big projects, they do the big parks, the big schools, big convention centers. Like, those things are pretty crucial, and they're pretty important to the general community. And it really sucks to see some companies that really just want to get it over with. They want to do an acceptable moderate design that looks okay and gets the money in. But I feel like at the end of the day, like, I mean, the city's the one that suffers, the people are the ones that suffer.
Yeah, I think like it's also systemic to how we've designed the government system to work, because for example, when we're sending our projects out to bid on who the construction company is going to be,
Mm-hmm.
it's not done how private is done, where you choose the most capable or like the most effective for the budget. When government does it, they send it out to, and not every project, but for the majority, they send it out to get the lowest bid. So whoever feels like they can do it for the lowest price, that's who they'll hire. And that like ensures that you have the lowest capable quality.
Yeah. And it sucks because the budget they allocate for the government is big. They're big
Yeah, there's a
budget.
lot of waste, I think, that happens too.
Yeah.
Like I was surprised at like some of the budgets at what they would achieve with some of them, because it would be like thousands and thousands of dollars to do like just move dirt around, or like basic things that you would think you could do for way less.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for as a rule of thumb, typically government projects, um, they charge double for the hourly rate that is spent on them.
Mm-hmm.
So that really sucks, right? You would imagine you'll get a lot of bang for your buck in that, because they charge double hourly rate, but they don't really pay double hourly rate to everyone working on it,
Right.
right? And that's shitty. That's
Yeah,
really shitty.
there's
And
no
I've been criticizing government this whole time, but I wouldn't say that uh, the entire government is like that. Like my bosses are
no,
very hard workers.
obviously not. I don't mean, okay, I don't mean like government offices and stuff like that, but just government in general.
I will agree that there's a lot of laxness because there's so much security. I think it breeds that. Um, because there's no like threat of I have to perform at my highest to secure my job. It makes you a little bit lax, and you're like, I could take an extra hour to do this, which means like you're not going to be always as effective as you can. But I like we're coming out of school. You're already been out of school, but we were in school. We were taught, oh, work, 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 at every second of every day. So we have to realize too that we're on the other side of the spectrum. Like not everyone wants to live their lives working as hard as we do, and I think we should be understanding of that.
Yeah. No, I agree, man. I mean, we go through masochist training, right? As designers, like all we want to do is work. All
So
we want to
true.
do as a hobby is work, and we don't see it as work, right? I mean, I enjoy the crap out of it. Like I'm a masochist. Like I truly enjoy investing like most of my days just working and like creating content, doing stuff, and like you said, most people, I mean, it's completely understandable, right?
Yeah.
We don't want to live our lives
Yeah.
working.
Yeah.
I think there's a balance. Like you can't take advantage of people, but you also can't like be a workaholic to the point of Zaha Hadid and then expect others to be on your level.
Yeah, the whole workaholic situation. I think in school it definitely teaches you how to think. That whole workaholic mindset. It teaches you that you can get radical ideas at 4 a.m. and execute them by the next day. I think that there's something special that's harbored through that kind of like weird chiseling of the mind and like sharpening your mind when it comes to situations like that. But I think it's safe to say that you're very passionate about the field and you truly are doing it because you love it. But is there anything you would have gone into career-wise before going into architecture school? I know you mentioned that you were on a path of doing some sort of music, right?
Yeah, I had studied music for 7 years. I played saxophone and clarinet.
Okay.
So like my goal was to be like the world's best player. And I had like this really generic dream of like making it into the New York Philharmonic. But I kid you not, I was a part of like 6 different bands at once. So as hard as like I was working in architecture school, I had been working that hard since like sophomore year of high school. So that's why it was kind of annoying going into college, having like this huge workload, because I had already like burned out in high school, and I just wanted to chill coming into college, and then it was like almost harder than what I was doing in music.
Yeah. But I mean, I guess you were, built for it, I guess you could say, or you were already conditioned to work.
I think it's more of conditioning. Like
Yeah.
I think there's definitely like some people that were born to be a certain way, but there's also learning to be a certain person.
Absolutely. Is there anything with like the knowledge you have now or the tools you have now that you would enjoy doing apart from landscape architecture?
Yeah, I'd love to do like most of the things I've heard Ramses answer before on other episodes, like animation. I love like movie production, uh, even like engineering and architecture. I started off in landscape, but like I've always loved architecture as well,
Yeah.
and just even like product design, just creating things. It's interesting.
Yeah. So design in general. That's yeah.
Yeah, man.
I think we all have that kind of like drive to design things or like kind of to reinvent certain things when we see an issue arise. You know, I think that's our natural ability as designers. We're problem solvers. You know.
Yeah, man. I wish I can go back. Well, not go back, go forward with what I have now and like do industrial design or product design. Like when I see my students, because I have half of my students are industrial designers, and man,
Mm.
they like really they truly spark that passion that I used to have when I was in high school. And like I'm so glad for this opportunity because I feel like I'm getting to learn about that, and I'm in a way getting that education. So it's exciting, right? To be able to like learn something new within the design field.
Yeah, teaching's another fun aspect. Like I had to teach high school students this semester for a competition that they were doing, and I found I like that a lot too.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I I love design. I love architecture. I will make sure to always maintain on that path, and I aspire to be an architect until the day I die. Um, but if I learned one thing in this past year that I've been teaching is that I enjoy teaching a lot more than I enjoy, working as an architect. And it doesn't mean that I want to do one over the other. I feel like the good thing about the fact that I'm working professionally and teaching is that I can bring the professionalism and the current reality of the field into the classroom. And in that sense, I can be as useful as possible to my students and kind of guide them in the right path. And another good thing is the fact that I graduated, like a year ago. So, I went through what they're going to go through. So, I can bring a lot of, let's say, knowledge and assistance to them and possibly answer any questions that they have. And the fact that the age gap that we have is not, it, it's what, like 5 to 10 years. Um, I can be useful for, life, school, professional work, and the level of fulfillment that I have when I see their projects like come about and be finalized. I think up to now that has surpassed uh, the level of fulfillment that I feel when I work professionally. Maybe one
Yeah,
day
I don't know
I'll be
what
in
it
an
is about
office.
helping people.
What happened?
I don't know what it is about like helping students, but it brings such a joy.
Yeah, man, it's amazing. I don't know. Like I've never been like happier, I guess. Professionally speaking.
Yeah, and it's great that you want to like work in the in like actual practice and teach, because that's the problem with a lot of teachers, that you teach how you were taught when you went to school, and then that's no longer the reality of the profession.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something that Chris and I always like harp on, and I don't know, man. I feel like as great as it is, and we say this all the time, as great as it is to know, the roots of the profession, how everything was done. I feel like there's a lack of the current stage of the profession that needs to be strongly implemented throughout the educational path.
Yeah. I
I
think that's
agree.
something that we'll do as our generation decides to practice, like you're saying, practice professionally and decides to teach. Well, that'll feed in. I think that's going to be something that happens organically as we all realize that issue arises. The last generation did it. I'm sure they were like, oh, wow, these students don't know XYZ. They graduated, they, worked professionally and they brought those things into the schooling. So I think it'll be a natural progression.
Let's hope. I don't think that hitting your face in a wall and learning that there was a mistake, it's completely natural. And ideally it'll happen
Yes. I hope that's
sooner
like the
than later.
biggest change.
Yeah, I don't think that's super organic, to be honest. I think it needs to be changed like quick because um, I don't know, me currently being in that field, me currently going through school, and I can speak for all of us, like there are a lot of things that we would change. Not that our schooling was bad, our schooling was great. I owe everything I am today to my schooling, but I do see a lot of voids and a lot of spots where I think it can definitely be improved upon, and not by a small percentage. Um, like I'm talking about like not total reformation of those void spots, but definitely include the things that we started learning in our last year throughout our whole year or our whole path, right? I mean, we learned professional office practice, comprehensive design, which included construction documents, and I think that's 80% of the field right now, right? It should not be 10% of schooling or 5% of schooling,
Yeah,
right?
I completely agree.
Same with professional office practice, how you should behave, logistics, types of business, how you should sell yourself, how you should structure a portfolio. Like all these things are reality, right? I agree that the school should make you fall in love with the profession and they should teach you those things, but I don't think they should sugarcoat the reality of it and then only give you a glimpse of it in your final year, like a lot of schools do. And then just, there you go. Good luck.
Yeah, that was the experience I got in landscape too, because they gave us our it's called landscape documentation class, and that's where you learn like what CDs are, like what the different phases of a project are. And I thought we should have learned that from the beginning, because then you'd have like an understanding of, oh, I'm only doing the design development. I'm not making construction documents, and that would have saved a lot of people a lot of time.
Yeah, man. I mean, if I wouldn't have worked professionally, I worked for an engineering office for 2 years. That's where I got to see CDs.
Hmm.
Before I worked professionally, I mean, again, I say this all the time. I did not have as much initiative as most of you until like a year ago that I somehow like got my shit together. Um, in my
You
third
kind
year
of
of
have to.
college, my first year of grad school, right? That's when I learned what CDs were. I thought that was like not part of the process. I legitimately thought that. I mean, I knew that obviously there was a difference between, like regular professional architecture and like the schooling aspect of it, but I didn't truly see that. Like I didn't truly saw what goes into it until then. And then that's when I started like getting the hang of it. And then that's when I started like, I guess, opening up to like all the things that we're losing, right? All the knowledge that we've been losing for years. Because I feel like at one point, design starts getting a little bit repetitive in school, right? I mean, every semester we do a project. It's a different project. We learn a typology of the project, and you execute, and then again and again, and you do that for 12 designs, right? At least for us specifically,
Mhm.
right? I mean, comprehensive design was the first one that really like at least I guess it's the same like level for you, the whole like CDs thing. But comprehensive design was when we had to make a building and actually make it work. Actually do the
Hmm.
structure of it, do the whole mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems. Actually think about how all these moving pieces affect your overall design. Because for the most part, we design for the sake of making pretty things, right? We had a design that we had a teacher that whenever we brought about any type of like structural talk or any logistics, when it came to architecture, he said, "Who cares? Just make something that looks cool." That's I don't know. That's not. I don't think that's productive,
Yeah.
right?
But I think that that kind of goes to my point. I think it may have gotten like lost the way I explained it, but I think you know the issues that we're bringing up now are all valid. And I think once we start going into teaching, I mean, you guys are already doing it. I'm sure you're already sprinkling those little chunks of knowledge to students, and I think that's what's important. I think over time, you know, a group of us that start teaching, even when I start teaching, I think I'm going to um, look at the way I present certain things, but I could use a whole video to kind of talk about that. So I won't go into it. Um, but I think you guys are already doing it in the way you're explaining it, and like, okay, hey, you should know this at this point. Let me give you the information I know. And I think as long as a group of us start doing that, our generation, that is, of architects and landscape architects, I think the schooling will just change, just because there's people doing things differently. And that's where I meant by it'll happen organically. You know what I mean?
Let's hope, man. We see
Yeah.
people that have been like 70 years in the field still doing
Yeah,
the thing.
yeah, we got to be hopeful. I guess you're right.
You know, I mean, let's hope.
So,
Yeah. I actually really like that about Ramses' like teaching, because he's always harping on empathy, and that's like one of the major components of my design too. I think our designs should always be empathetic to their users.
absolutely.
Always.
But listen, man, it's been a great conversation. I think we touched on a lot of common threads, but we got a lot of like new perspective from you being our first landscape architect, and I think that shed a lot of light to us that rings true throughout all of architecture. And there's obviously issues that arise with different parts of the field, but it was good to hear. So we appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
There's
And it's
one
good to
thing
meet
I
you.
want to talk about, actually.
Go for it.
So we're friends, right? We're good friends.
Yeah.
I feel like maybe in school, and we see this a lot in the field, but for some reason I see this like constant battle between landscape architects and architects. And then the same thing for architects and interior architects. And I feel like it's so childish, right? Because at the end of the day, like, we're all part of the same branch, right? Landscape architecture and interior design, originally came from architecture, and we used to be able to, have like ownership on all three fields. And then we started branching out and relinquishing, I guess, ownership and power to like the other different aspects. And I feel like, I don't know, maybe you can like shine some light in that, because I know that when I did my thesis, we were tasked with working with some landscape architects. And even though, at least for me, I thought it was like not a super smooth sail, but I did get along with them, and I respect what they do, right? But I feel like there's this constant war between them.
Oh, I completely feel it too. I think what a lot of it comes down to is like, because you're getting two different specializations now, right? So then you're going to have two slightly different perspectives. And then, so like, let's say we have the same project and I propose like this outdoor space that has all of these different ecologies. And then you propose the same place, but you propose it more construction oriented, like having to do with structure, maybe like some kind of pavilion or something. That's going to show like what you were taught to value. And then we're going to start judging each other based off of our values. Like, maybe you put like 3 palm trees, and then to me that's not a good landscape design, but you don't know better. And then maybe I put like some kind of like whack thing that doesn't even stand, like the wind's going to blow and it blows over. So that just, and then we're like, because we're not capable in each other's fields, I think that's where a lot of the judgment comes from.
Yeah, like, I feel like, I feel like the typical misconception, and maybe it's not a misconception, maybe it is the general, I guess, outlook in the profession, but to me it's a misconception. The typical architect wants to do like this like concrete building, and that's it, right? And then because from what I've seen, at least within like the schooling field, like some landscape architects feel like, the building is the enemy, the concrete is the enemy, the car is the enemy, and those things should be completely, eradicated, right? And as much as those things might be harmful, or might pose problems, like, those things are to stay, right? And that's something that, whether you want to or not, like, I think that's something that's a constant. And I don't think the solution to something is destroying it completely, like Thanos. um, I think those are problems that we need to learn how to work with, and be able to like incorporate into urban fabric designs and stuff like that. And then on the other hand, architects, for the most part, they only, so something I see in a lot of students in school is that they design these projects like standalone, in midair, completely negligent to the context or urban fabric, and is like this concrete box, and that's all that matters. But I believe that a successful project is a project that has the urban fabric and landscape elements incorporated into the building, right? And I feel like, I don't know, like maybe it's a loss in translation between our different educations, because I see a lot of professors and I've experienced landscape professors that feel the same way that a lot of these students feel, that architecture is the enemy, and same way vice versa. A lot of architect professors that feel like landscape isn't necessary, and sustainable and passive systems throughout the building is the landscape element. And well, that might have some truth to it. Like I don't think that's correct, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't agree with like the picture you paint of landscape architects. I think that's kind of like a caricature.
I'm not painting a picture. I'm just saying, like,
Yeah, your observations of like what we do
yeah,
or like our views. I would think that's like there's a spectrum, and there are some people in landscape that value the ecology and like natural landscapes, and there are some people that value just urban planning. Um, so to say that like we all think that way, I wouldn't agree with.
I didn't say
But
that.
okay, fair enough. So, but I'm losing my train of thought.
You know what I mean? Like, I feel like at least within the educational field, there's
Mhm.
this, I don't know, like this constant struggle of power into what's important. And what I'm trying to get at is that I think they're both
Oh, I
important.
remember.
That they're
Yeah.
both important, right? Like we should learn, I guess, like a little bit about the other thing, and learn how to incorporate both of them together.
Yeah. That's what I was gonna say. I think architects who are good consider the context, and I think landscape architects who are good consider the buildings that they're designing around. I don't think, which is what you're getting at. I don't think like you're good if you just propose a natural ecology. And I would encourage you to check out our thesis. Like we just, or if any landscape thesis, we just recorded it, so you can check it out whenever. But you might be surprised. It's not as like how you're describing landscape. It's more like urban planning.
I'm not describing it anyway.
Well, how you're talking about it.
I'm not talking about it in any negative aspect. I'm
Yeah, I
saying,
don't mean negative. I just mean how you're describing it.
okay, fair, I guess. Um, but yeah, definitely, man. Like I actually went into university as an engineer, and then I decided to go into landscape architecture. Um, and then you know how we did the first 2 years of undergrad, and we kind of do a little bit of everything, and then we branch out towards those 2 years is when I decided to kind of, I guess, go into architecture instead of landscape. Um,
Yeah, you were originally like enrolled in landscape, right?
landscape, yeah, but it's something that I would like to do. Like I like urban planning. I like large scale projects, and that's something that I really want to like focus on a lot more, right? That's something I always talk about with Chris. I like I don't like vertical projects. I like horizontal projects, if that makes
Hmm.
sense.
Yeah,
Um, and mostly kind of like public institutions that incorporate like urban fabric, urban planning, landscape, and I guess a series of complexes all throughout. That's
yeah. That's one of the differences that really drew me to landscape is that our projects, because of the scale, tend to be collaborative and tend to be for a large scale, like a large user basis.
mhm.
So that inherently takes the ego out of it. Like you can't have a private residence that it's only what this one person wants. You need to create a space that serves everyone in society and thinks about how we connect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hate private residences. I, I like large public projects.
Yeah, I think to a point that you guys both made is there's, I guess, a lack of harmony between the two fields, and there
Yes.
needs to be uh,
Yeah,
a
I think
more
it's
a
petty.
more like connection, a more like kind of what Rams was saying. Like at one point, this was all done by, let's say, one office, right? We should all treat the profession as if we're in the mind of making one goal happen, not, hey, we want to make a building, and then the next goal is, and then we're going to put landscape. Like they should work in tandem. But I think it's kind of our job as students, new graduates, and just overall like students of the game, if you will, to learn each other's trades. I took a landscape class as an elective. I think it was theory of landscape. I can't remember 100% the name of the class, but it was majority of urban planning and how certain elements of the urban fabric could be altered or changed for the betterment of society. I think that right there, and I took it like last summer, so I took it almost a year ago, right before I graduated. I think elements like that are what makes school such a beautiful place. I learned that with the knowledge that I had of architecture and what we really do. And now when I go out into the field, when I'm given that opportunity, I know how to marry the two and create better architecture, which is like all three disciplines. You know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
think that's something that we all definitely need to explore.
Yeah.
Yeah, the more you can cross pollinate, the better.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I agree. I mean, the picture that I was painting was like the opposite bad spectrum of each one, like architecture and landscape.
I get what you were saying. I kind of because we talk about that often.
I was literally painting like the bad opposite, or like the
Oh,
bad
okay.
extreme of each one, not
Yeah.
the general.
Yeah.
But I think Austin hit it on the head. I think what he was saying is what you were saying, Ramses. Is those are caricatures.
Yeah.
I think if you were to look on both ends of the spectrum, like we're two architects speaking with a landscape architect, and I'm pretty sure we hold similar values. And if we all sat down and designed something together, we could come up with a very harmonious, pretty nice piece of architecture, or something part of the urban fabric, or whatever you may want to call it. But I think that's lacking in the field for a lot of the reasons we spoke about earlier. So I think it's our part and our generation's part to kind of like bring this kind of like really cool, cohesive, collaborative nature that we have and keep it going, you know?
Yeah, I just think there should be good, like, no judgment, good talks between people. Everyone has their own basis of knowledge. Don't like hate on someone just because it's different from your own.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's something that we see a lot, right? Like ignorance, right? I mean, and I don't mean
generally,
ignorance,
yeah.
like, I know ignorance has like a really negative connotation, like, but I mean just ignorance that is not your fault, right? It's ignorance due to a lack of education and exposure to the reality of those other fields, and the importance of those other fields, and you know.
Yeah, we all have ignorance of everything.
Yeah.
Not everything, but like a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
I was completely ignorant about architecture. I was ignorant about everything until I, started school, and up to this day. And I mean, I can speak for all of us, like whether we want to accept it or not, like we're still ignorant about, a bunch of things that we're only going to become less ignorant about
Mm-hmm.
as we get older, as we experience those things, as we get hit in the face and realize that some things don't work. And then you have to kind of like step back. So I don't know. I feel like it's something that we spoke about last time, and I feel like we have to be flexible, and we have to be a lot less prideful. I feel like a lot of architects are very prideful. They're prideful people. They have the God complex, and I feel like they need to step it down, and they need to become an individual, right? Another human being that thinks about what the human experience is like and how regular people would experience a project.
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir on that one.
Absolutely. I you said you have an architecture background, so you went into, or I should say, I guess like Ramses and I's architecture, I guess, because your landscape architecture is still architecture to me. So we have like a common thread question. I don't know your answer, but if you were just basing off architecture solely and not the people that they are, would you be Team Mies or Team Corbu? And there's only one right answer. So
Yeah, that one's hard for me to answer because I didn't take history 3, and we
okay.
don't generally focus on like architecture precedents as much as architects do throughout graduate school.
Mm-hmm.
So I only can remember, like, I went to Villa Savoie, so I know of that project, and I mean, like, I studied them in undergrad, but that was like 3 years ago.
Right.
So it's hard for me to say. I don't know.
Which is cool. I think that's good. I actually think that's an appropriate answer, and one that kind of goes along with, I guess, something I would do in the or that I hope to do in the educational field when I get to the point, is really extending that idea of history and theory and kind of intertwining it with design in general. I think these people are, the buildings that they created are important because of principle, but they can be used in a new way, and I think that's to our interpretation and how we design. So I think it'd be nice to see even a landscape idea of that.
Yeah, I completely judge projects based off of like their theory and their historical impact. Like it's just what is the intent, and then how well did that play out.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what would be the equivalent of those? Maybe Parc La Villette,
I love that project.
right? That to me, that's the equivalent. I mean, the landscape equivalent. Um,
I got you.
Mhm.
those
I
movements.
I
I
mean,
mean,
I could talk.
I know it's not like completely related, but
Mhm.
that's what I would think would be like kind of like
Yeah,
the general background knowledge that most architects learn in school and in their specific histories classes.
yeah.
Courses.
What was really good about that project was that it was made for the people in Paris, where so much of the architecture was made for the monarchy, and you would have the whole like idea behind the project is creating spaces where people could have designated areas to just create their own program. It wasn't something like a formal garden designated by someone for you. And I just love that idea, like
I agree,
something
man.
from the bottom up, not the top down.
Yeah, I
Absolutely.
agree. It's all about people. People
Mhm.
make the world go around.
So
Man,
sorry to not be able to answer
no,
your
that's a great
your
answer.
Oh no, I think that's
That's
a
a great
great
answer.
answer.
Yeah, I appreciate the fact that unlike what most people do, that they'll just pick for the sake of picking, you're actually rationalizing and you're giving an adequate answer based on the education that you've had in that specific, general field. That's
Yeah,
something.
I really value people that can say I don't know.
Yeah. So, man, thank you. It was a great talk. Like we really appreciate having you on
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
shining some light on a lot of things a lot of questions we had, um, and like doubts, I guess.
Yeah. And your perspective. We really appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Yeah. Again, thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Anytime.
man.